So welcome everybody tonight to Geoengineering Free Canada's call, and our featured guest tonight is Reinette Senum. I've known her for a while now, so we got introduced, I don't know, 2 years ago or something. Yeah, bit
Yeah,
over 3 years.
yeah.
Yeah, so well, anyway, but I will open the floor right away to Reinette because please introduce yourself, tell the people who you are and what you're doing and where you're coming from.
Sure. Thank you, Bettina. And thank you everyone for taking the time. I know everyone has lots of things to do, so it's nice that you're all showing up. My name is Reinette Senum. I'm in Northern California. I'm actually living in the area I was raised in since I was 4 years old. I'm a two-time mayor, council person, and very involved for the last 25 years in, local politics, building our local economy, sustainability in the real mom and pop version, not the United Nations version. And have been looking at the skies since I was a little child when I used to actually sail as a child and just observe the skies all the time. And of course, many, many years ago, I started observing, like many of you, these really weird extended contrails in the air, and it's continued to get worse. And then when COVID struck, before then, I was engaged in fighting and calling out geoengineering and just trying to wake people up to it. And then COVID struck, and that was on our doorstep. So I had to kind of do an abrupt turn and fight against that, like many of us had to do. And then 2 years ago here in Northern California, we had this disastrous snowstorm that was 60 feet of snow, wiped out the wildlife. The wildlife never recovered. It started snowing in November, didn't end in May, and we lost bears and fox and deer and squirrels. I mean, it was just awful. And it just crushed homes and crushed ponderosa pines. It was this really weird heavy snow. And we at that time had a lot of women, mama warriors around the state of California collecting rain sample and hail samples. And of course, the results came back very high in aluminum and all these other heavy metals, strontium, barium, cobalt, and so on. And at that point in time, I thought, you know what, I feel like I don't need to be on the front lines of pushing back on COVID. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, get back into my, geoengineering pants and start, pushing back on that. And so I started a nonprofit called Gen 7, which is based upon the seventh generation principle, which is every decision you make today should serve 7 generations from now. And under that umbrella, we started Save Our Skies. And so I hired this really great constitutional attorney and team out of Texas and raised tens of thousands of dollars, like 50 some $60,000 to pay for the legal research and the legal team and to really address and try to come to this legal fight through the constitutional lens. So there were several different routes we went initially, interestingly enough. One of the first routes we were going after, which we thought was really easy, we were trying to avoid a legal fight that was going to involve a lot of experts and science and convincing people that geoengineering exists and because when you get into that, first of all, it gets extraordinarily expensive. It takes a lot of time, like years and years. And a lot of times that information just goes right over the jury's head or the judge's head. They don't get it. So what we looked at is one of the things that popped out immediately that would be an easy win to get us going was the fact that we heard out there, and I'm sure Bettina knows this, that there was a gag order in America on meteorologists and weather reporters, that they had a gag order by the US government that they could not discuss any kind of geoengineering modification that they saw, let's say, in the radar, or if they were heard of or were witnessing any proof of any kind of geoengineering or weather modification, they had to be quiet. So we ended up pursuing this as a First Amendment right violation. And ultimately, there's something called PEER. It's the public employee union, essentially. It was through them where this gag order had come. And we kept trying to find what's called the source document, the original, the original document of this letter, this decree from the government that is basically a gag order. So we spent many, many, many weeks on this. And ultimately, we talked to the peer attorneys who were in charge of this lawsuit, and they said that document doesn't exist. And we said, well, what do you mean that document doesn't exist? They said that there is no gag order. It's actually it's internal negotiating thing that's going on back and forth, and there is no gag order. And we were like, well, that's news to us because it's in books, it's in documentaries. It's all over the place. It's on websites. I mean, like it doesn't exist. So we had to back out of that avenue and figure, okay, now what are we going to do? And at that time, there's actually quite a few environmental changes, NEPA and so on in America that really kept shifting our sales because they were big changes. They were big federal changes that kept affecting us. Long story short, during this time, I also wanted to engage the citizens because the legal team was saying a couple different things. One is this is a huge fight. You want to have a lot of eyes on it. You want there to be a lot of public pressure, and you don't want it to just be like swept under the rug. So we started with our Save Our Skies, as Bettina's been on many times, holding these bi-monthly Save Our Skies Swarm webinars. And we hold those on the second Tuesday, fourth Wednesday of the month. And what we started doing is we have this really great Save Our Skies team. Jim Lee of Climate Viewers on it. We have a meteorologist, Jim Lee, Jeff Ray. We have a woman named Catherine Sari who's going out there all the time and just doing public records requests, collecting rainwater, confronting people at airports, actual pilots, and really paving a path and showing people how to do it. So we put together a PowerPoint, which is like a toolkit for people who want to go out there and do all these different things. Jeff Ray, who's a meteorologist, began to actually teach us how to read the skies. When you expect to see those extended contrails that we call chemtrails, when the atmospheric conditions are just right, when they're not just right and you should not be seeing those extended contrails, then you know there's some kind of geoengineering program going on. And I have to say, folks, one of the things that was really amazing for me over these last 2 years is that when I started this, and I think Bettina can, really talk to this as well, what I thought geoengineering was and what I thought I was seeing versus what I believe I'm seeing now has changed radically. And one of the big things that Jim Lee especially really showed was that look at, yes, there are clandestine geoengineering programs going on. I mean, I have no doubt there's a depopulation program going on. There's all these things happening. But one of the things that's happening day in, day out, whether you see it or not, is that we now have 39 million commercial flights a year. We're burning through 15 million barrels of jet fuel a day. And while they clean the jet fuel, there's all this nanoparticulate matter. And in that nanoparticulate matter is all this, is like a graphene lamina coating, and inside are all the heavy metals and so on. And no big deal, nanoparticulate matter, but it's 15 million barrels every day burned over our heads over and over and over again, and that's accumulative. So he was trying to teach people like, yeah, we got an issue with all these other things, but this is a growing problem. On top of it, we have commercial shipping, which burns the nastiest, dirtiest bunker fuel out there. And for decades, have been burning this bunker fuel, and that's increased exponentially because we are now shipping all of our raw goods to China. We get all these cheap goods. I mean, the amount of cargo ships is an unbelievable amount, and that's far worse than commercial airlines. That was shocking to me. And basically, what Jim pointed out was whether you see those chemtrails or not, every single day you're getting sprayed on by these heavy metals, day in, day out. So we learned this, and there's several different things we're looking at. And then ultimately, after a year and a half of having the legal team, I seriously started looking at letting them go. It was going to be very expensive. I didn't find them easy to work with. They didn't really follow through all the time on the stuff I needed them to in a timely manner. And also it was just going to be expensive. And I was really the one having to do all the legwork. So I'm like, if I'm doing the legwork, why don't I do this and take this to court pro se? Here in America, there's a couple different things in California in particular. In California, you can actually be what's called a private attorney general. Most people don't know this is a California constitutional right. And I could go in there and actually represent the people of California on big items like that, that represent hundreds of thousands or millions of Californians. Or I can do what's called pro se, which is basically I am going to be the attorney for myself or on behalf of, let's say, the American people or the California people. So I was weighing that back and forth. I was studying constitutional common law in the U.S. and what that parameter would look like. Came up with some different concepts of what we could actually are legal avenues, and then I started putting together a legal team that was very much from like Save Our Skies Swarm webinar. Anyway, they're the team that's out there doing all this work, but I just last week had them sign NDAs and say, okay, you guys ready to do this? And you're going to be the actual official research team. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pursue the California Environmental Protection Agency, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and the FAA. And within the California EPA is something called CARB, which is the California Air Resource Board. the reason why and what triggered that ultimately was, you guys may know that here in the United States, there's been a lot of legislation being passed, geoengineering legislation, which is fantastic. One of the more well-known is the Tennessee geoengineering legislation. But what happened was that we come to find out that these states have absolutely no say over their airways above. They have no say whatsoever. It's actually regulated by pretty much the FAA and the Clean Air Act. The Clean Air Act of 1963 essentially says, hey, yeah, commercial aircraft, yeah, spewing things here and there, but that's just the price of doing business. That was 1963. Since then, commercial aircraft has increased 2,000%. And we know clandestine programs and cloud seeding programs have also increased as well. And so we decided to actually attack the Clean Air Act and to go after the EPA, California and US EPA and the FAA for not doing their job in protecting what is called the public trust doctrine. It is their job to protect our water, our air, our soil, our waterways, our food, everything for generations to come.
Excellent.
And they absolutely.
Stay in bed.
Hello.
Troy?
Does somebody have a comment to that, or are they just talking and don't realize it?
That was probably an accident.
Okay. So there has, I like to say there's not even a fox guarding the hen house. There's just no fox at all. It's just a free run. And so there's no testing. When we would show CARB here, the California Air Resource Board, that look at all these heavy metals in the rainwater, they're like, oh gosh, that's just not our purview. We don't even know how to test for that. We don't even know what the healthy standards are. You need to look that up. I kid you not. And that's not how it works. So nobody has been holding their feet to the fire. Nobody has been challenging the Clean Air Act of 1963. And I'm sorry, but you can't say this is just the price of doing business when it's actually going to kill us, because that's the ultimate price. And so what we're going to do is challenge the EPA to start testing, to rein this in, and to force the airlines to stop doing what they're doing. And what's interesting is Jim Lee's helping us with what we might be doing. And I have to talk to, we have a former children's health defense attorney who's working with me as a consultant for my pro se to hold my hand as the attorney and take this to court. I have to ask her some questions like, would we be better off, as Jim Lee suggests, not necessarily mentioning geoengineering and getting into that, we have to prove geoengineering, but make it more about pollution. Okay, we've got this pollution. These are the different ways it's happening, including what we should do here in California are all the pesticides and glyphosates and herbicides and so on that are, we're talking thousands and millions of tons a year being sprayed in California, unbelievable amount. So, because that's also aerial, right? They do it aerially. And so, so we're looking at framing this in such a way that we talk about geoengineering, but not talk about geoengineering, so they don't get caught up in the conspiracy theory of it and us having to prove it, where it's like, no, this is just how we're getting polluted this way, that way, this way, by planes, by commercial, by by agriculture, blah blah blah, and just cut to the chase. So this is the approach we're taking, and what we have to do now is a couple different steps. I've already written up the complaint, the actual legal brief that we can file. However, I'm sure this is the first draft. There's going to be many changes. But before we even file that, which would be like the Ninth District Court, we have to do what's called a petition for ruling. Because if we go and we file first, the court's going to throw it out saying you've not exhausted all avenues. So we have to petition the FAA, we have to petition the Cal EPA and the US EPA and say, hey, do you see all this evidence? This is all the stuff that's been going on. This is how much air travel's increased. You have not been protecting the public doctrine. You've not been testing at all. You've not updated your Clean Air Act since 1963. And you need to do this or we're going to take you to court. So that we send that out. That's going to take a lot of information gathering and research and so on. So I have my little team working on that now. And then we submit that. That'll probably take about 6 months. But during that 6 months, we start building our case. We're working. It's going to take that much time anyway. We start building the case, and then we proceed accordingly to what kind of response, if any response, from the petition to ruling, for a ruling, I should say. So That's kind of like a 30,000 foot view in a nutshell. And, I've put in a lot of information forward. So, does anybody have any questions, clarifying questions or anything like that whatsoever right now? I've been putting a lot of information out.
I have another question regards legal action. Remember you were taking make sunsets to court. Is that still going on? Is that
Well, what we were going to, but what ended up happening is that was one of the routes we're taking. And then what happened was Catherine, and we're still pursuing this route actually. Catherine Sari was collecting rainwater samples. And during this time, there was this huge incident that a railroad and a train got washed away, millions of dollars of damage in her county. And it ends up that she happens to have that specific cloud seeding project that caused it,
mm,
plus the millions of dollars that the county collected from FEMA. And we discussed at that time, I still had my team of attorneys. And I said, should I continue to go after Make Sunsets, or should we go after these guys that they actually caused damage? And she just happened to just collect the rainwater and just have the flights, on flight radar. She collected all of that. And they're like, no, we'd be better off to where there's actual damages. So we're pursuing that route instead.
okay.
And one of the things we're going to do there is we have been working on notices of liability. Um, we've been doing notices of liabilities through Cal Washington's Empower Movement. We had about, I think, 35 or so people sign up through Save Our Skies, but only a tiny little handful actually follow through on the notice of liabilities.
Mhm.
And from what Cal said is people get intimidated doing it, which is what Christian Northrup, who did the same thing around COVID, found that people just got really intimidated and they didn't know how to explain, having to have witness signatures. And so either we have to do some more hand holding or we just move on. But there's a gentleman by the name of David Jose who also teaches about this, constitutional law and common law. And they do a type of notice of liability, but it's very, very different, much more short, much more succinct, and not so intimidating. So I think what we're going to really do is try the notice of liability process. And this is essentially you send an affidavit saying, prove to us when you're doing this cloud seeding, you're not doing all this harm. Like,
Mm,
because once you're doing it, if you're doing it over heads, it's a tacit agreement. Our silences are tacit agreement. So prove to us there's no harm. And you have to do this 3 times. If they do not respond, which they never do because they can't prove there's no harm, then you take those affidavits, and those affidavits are your proof that they are admitting, it's their admission to the fact that they are causing harm, and then you take them to court. So that's the route we're taking. And essentially, what we're really trying to do is we have several different tactics that we're taking. It's kind of throwing different spaghettis against the wall and seeing which ones stick. If this affidavit process works
mhm.
and we have some traction in the courts through this affidavit process, then we're going to have others do it around the country with other geoengineering and or cloud seeding that's going on. Because cloud seeding, they right now are planning on increasing it 200% in the US, 200%, which is not good for us whatsoever. It's just out of control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds like, I mean, BC is not so much affected with cloud seeding. Cloud seeding is more in Alberta. We do, well, obviously, Weather Modification Inc. is located in Calgary, in Alberta. So that's actually where it's more happening rather than in BC. And with well, obviously last year there was this big weather event in Calgary. I don't know if you guys remember that, where the big storm hit Calgary, and it was just absolutely incredible. Well, in a negative way, what happened
Right.
there, they pulled out the trees and all that kind of stuff. And then we were trying to, together with Jeff, actually, we were trying to analyze this event. And what happened was it actually was, well, and we really need to understand that nature is still happening, right? So the natural
Yeah.
weather, it's still there. Unfortunately, it's certainly influenced, it's modified. There is lots because of the pollution, there is these things going on. But nature is still there. So we shouldn't underestimate nature. And then
Right.
we analyzed this weather event. And when you are a little bit more familiar with the geographics here in between Alberta and BC, there is this big mountain range, right? The Rocky Mountains going from north
Right.
to south. And this is how it works, right? This is how things, or actually weather works, right? It piles up on top of the mountains, and then, and especially Calgary, because Calgary is flat. Alberta, in that, where Calgary is located, is very flat. So it just dives down, right? And so what happened then, and together with Jeff, we were looking at, well, obviously the flight trackers and certainly the weather. We looked at windy, the radiosonde data, all that kind of stuff. And then what we found out was it was a really, really weird cloud seeder. Two cloud seeders actually were flying along, and they were trying to stop this or interfere or whatever with this massive storm. And then when you looked at the track itself, they were flying like zigzag all over the place, and all of a sudden they took off.
Wait, so they were trying to stop it or they were trying to enhance it?
Now we're trying to stop it. That's what it looked like.
How can I ask you a question? How can you tell the difference between them trying to enhance it or stop it? How does that look different? Because I know when we see it here, it's generally a figure eight. I mean, it could vary, but generally a figure eight is kind of the iconic, figure they fly, and it's right as the storm's starting to come in. So what
Yeah.
were you seeing that was different than that?
So what we were obviously what we were trying to look at was how, because the storm came so piled up above the mountain tops, and they were trying to stop it obviously from coming into Calgary. So they wanted to rain it off before it comes
They're trying to
into
drop the load of water before it.
before it actually hit Calgary. And that certainly could never happen because the storm was so massive that they actually had to really take off. Nobody would ever fly into a massive storm like this.
And do you think they made matters worse accidentally? Or do you think, because I know that when Chernobyl happened, for instance, Jim Lee talks about how the radioactive cloud was coming towards Moscow, and they literally went right before that. There's some clouds, and they rained it out. They rained most of the radiation out so it didn't hit Moscow, which
Hmm.
is quite brilliant.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
But so maybe it sounds like they just weren't successful at all, but I don't know if it would have made matters worse accidentally.
Yeah, so this is how I understood what we were looking at. So make it, yeah, make it worse. Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
I'm
Um,
done.
yeah. Anyway, well, cloud seeding, many events actually really boil down to cloud seeding. There's lots of, I find, weather events that you can actually really kind of link to cloud seeding. That's what I
Well,
came.
and that's one of the things, one of the things we uncovered because we've also been doing public records requests over the last year or so with these cloud seeding companies and with the counties who hire them. And what we've also discovered is that they aren't doing environmental impact reports. They aren't doing public notifications that are required to do all the time. They'll do like, oh, we're gonna be doing cloud seeding for the next 5 years. I kid you not, that's totally illegal.
Mhm.
And there's no real-time reporting. So if they're out there cloud seeding and then the next day, on the other side of the border, the state border, a ranch, they all get washed away because they didn't know there's a cloud seeding project going on the day before that happened to affect them, later on or on the other side of the mountain. So there's no real-time reporting, so we can actually see, hey, this caused damage. It's very nebulous and it's very difficult to pinpoint, which they do this by design. So there's a lot of things that we need to do, which is like if we're going to be doing cloud seeding, which I really hope we can prevent,
Mhm.
because it only increases, it doesn't increase the rainfall that much anyway, like maybe 5%, maybe 10% max. But for the power companies, for the water companies that, want this, it's, extra 5, 10% is great for their stockholders, but it's at such a cost for us. And where we look at the area where like Catherine Sari is, where she is in Yosemite, she's near Yosemite, that center part of Yosemite, the trees are just beautiful, old, ancient trees are just dying. I mean, they're just splitting in half, and their limbs are dropping. And it's this one swath in the middle of Yosemite that's just really terrible. And ironically, that is where they do a ton and just a ton of cloud seeding all the time.
Mhm.
And so I just accidentally noticed that 2 years ago I was there, and that was before we were collecting the water and Catherine and all this stuff was happening. But I remember being there, coming in, and I just started crying. It was just like it was a war zone. I'm like, what the hell happened to all the trees? And then we
Mhm.
went more north into Yosemite, and the trees are back. They're fine. They're pretty healthy. I was like, well, why that area? Why is that area so bad? Then I come to find out because now I'm watching the cloud seeding. I'm like, oh, that's where they're doing all the cloud seeding. Isn't that something, isn't it kind of funny how sometimes life will put you in a position, a place where you just happen to see something, you don't know you're seeing anything of significance yet, and then later on you can kind of put the pieces together. That was one of those instances. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, is there any question? Well, for Reinette in that regard, so
I
please
th
go ahead.
I thought I saw was somebody else asking about the dust, or was that you? Oh, this cherry. No, the dust was sent to Italy, and they should have gotten it at least last week. And I've been looking at my proton mail every day for a response, but they should be testing it. I don't have anything from fog. Um, and in fact, unfortunately, too, it's really hard to kind of test for that stuff. But I'm excited. I'm very excited to see what the deck results are, and I would hope they come soon. Um,
The pictures you sent actually, they looked very like silverish.
I know they look, I mean, that's why I kept asking. And then I had other friends later on, a few days later, saying, "Hey, Reinette, what's all over our hot tub top?" And da da da. I mean, so I had a lot of people contact me afterwards where they were seeing it too, like, what is this? And they collected it, and it was this gray, sooty, kind of silvery. I'm like, well, that's really fascinating. So, and I asked, was there a lot of smoke? Was there some kind of smoky inversion? We're not having any forest fires. There hasn't been anything like that whatsoever. And everyone I know is like, no, but I mean, the amount of dust that I had on my deck would had to have been a significant fire, right? The kind of, because I've had those in the past, and it had to be a kind of fire where, there'd be a lot of ash everywhere and you could see it clearly and so on. But no, it didn't, it was not pollen, it was not natural. And in fact, I just had another woman contact me on Facebook who's local, who said, Reinette, I was looking for my lost dog, clear as night, still, absolutely just still, not a breeze at all. And she videotaped it for me, and she puts her flashlight up in the sky, and there's like these little tiny microscopic things just flying around like this. I mean, like tons, right? And she's like, what is that? And so then she went back the next night, and it was there, but not as much. But she was not disturbing the dust or dirt, the ground. There was no wind. There was nothing falling, the clear, crystal clear, clear skies at night. And I hate to say it. I said, but that looks to me like a lot of smart dust flying around because they weren't bugs. It was just like little specks of dust, but they're just like, it's like they had a consciousness and they're just kind of like flying around and all over the place. And I asked her, I said, can get your little credit card, scrape some stuff off, and collect this stuff and get as much as you possibly can and then take a photograph, send it to me. And I want to see if it looks like the stuff that I found on my deck.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
know,
Okay.
so and I don't know if you guys saw my recent Substack last week about the Swiss gentleman, the team that came out with the 2 years of analysis of the weird spider webs that are coming out of the skies. Did you see that at all, Bettina?
I saw your Substack, but I didn't look through it yet. But yes, I did see that you sent it out. Yeah.
Well, uh, so quite crazy. So again, Catherine, myself, others around California, other places in the States, Hawaii, a guy named Matt Roski from Cultivate Elevate. We've all seen this really weird, like clumpy spiderweb stuff coming out of the sky, and it does not look natural at all. Well, same thing was happening in Europe, northern Italy, Germany, northern Germany, Switzerland, France, Austria, same weird kind of spider webs. And so this gentleman by the name of Christian Oesch put together fantastic research team. And they got into a laboratory. They actually had one lab test this stuff, like, oh, it's just some kind of polymer, blah, blah, blah. Ends up they lied. It was just the lab lied. It's you don't always get honest labs. They're sometimes there to make sure that you don't really find out what's going on.
Mhm.
They found another lab and they're actually able to go in there at nighttime and it almost cost about $200,000 in testing. They were taking these webs, they're trying to cut them, but they were crushing under the blade, the special blade. So they had to go out there, and the guys in the laboratory actually had to go out there and justify buying a 20,000 diamond tip blade so they could cut these webs, and they're going across as well as long way without crushing them because it ends up that inside they were hollow.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were able to get this diamond blade and do all this different kind of testing with all these spectrometers and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And when they opened this up, it looks like the inside of an okra, essentially. And they discovered it holds a payload. It's a delivery device, essentially. And they
Mm-hmm.
found there's 9 different compounds that they've never heard of. They're not on the what's called the data safety sheets that's required by international law, that you have a compound, a toxin, a chemical, anything like that is required by international law to be on these data sheets. And there's these 9 compounds that they uncovered that they've never even heard of before. And so what they also figured out was there's these planes that have these are essentially flying overhead. They have containers of liquid, and they use the negative positive charge of the planet. And what happens is that it comes out as liquid, and when it shoots out, it turns into these very extraordinarily fine threads, like spider web threads. But the stuff that we are uncovering, the little clumpy stuff that we're seeing kind of fall down, what they believe is happening is that those are the threads that are probably getting exposed to the high heat from the jets. And that's kind of clumping them together so then we can see them, because there's many times, and in fact, Nikki Florio was pointing this out when she was staying at my place, where in the early morning when the sun is rising, I look out the deck, there's like these really, really fine, fine lines of cobwebs like just floating everywhere. And you're like, I don't have that many spiders. Where did that come from? And we always figured it was some kind of weird genetic stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that that stuff was this other stuff that we were discovering, because that was the stuff that got exposed to the high heat, for the exhaust, of the fuel exhaust. And so that's the stuff we easily identify. And so they spent 2 years undercover in the cloak of night discovering that this, and it's not only it have a payload, it can have anything inside of it, including mRNA vaccines, but there's layers to it, and it's time release. And this is the most frightful of all, it can target crops, it can target individuals, it can target body parts, it can target whatever it wants to target. It has an intelligence to it, and they can target it. And and it's highly toxic. So we have people grabbing it and like, whatever you do, do not touch that stuff. It's highly, highly toxic. And they shared some of the toxic compounds. Is like, you do not want to handle this stuff with your bare hands, which a lot of people have, including myself. And so maybe that's why I'm sick. But so that was a jaw dropper. That was an absolute jaw dropper, and I highly, highly recommend watching that. These gentlemen, what they have what they have uncovered is done so scientifically well that it would absolutely uphold, in court, and would have standing. And they did it for that very reason, and they're going to their governments as well, saying you've got to stop this as well. So
Mm-hmm.
it was staggering, a staggering discovery ultimately.
Wow. We've got a hand up. Nadia, go right ahead.
Thank you, Renee.
Yes.
Really enjoying your talk. I'm wondering, you live in California, is that correct?
Yes, Northern California.
Yeah. What have you found any links between geoengineering and these recent fires? It seems so out of season.
Well, a couple different things. One is it's just they've had like 9 months of no rain, so there's that. There's no doubt that all these heavy metals that we have coated everywhere, right, make the fires extra hot and burn really fast and intense. And so that's a combination. And my conclusion, for the most part, with these fires, which would also include Lahaina, would include Paradise, which is not very far from us, very same similar geography, is that what they do is, I think they wait for high wind events, really easy cover. Don't even need to make the winds kick up. They just wait for them. They go out there. They have arsons planned, like the LA fires, again, similarly to what we saw with Lahaina. 3 fires started simultaneously in 3 different positions, so you're completely surrounded. And then once you've got the smoke and the chaos and this and the that, and you can't see very well anymore, then I think the DEWs come in, the direct energy weapons come in, and they they do their job. And I do believe smart meters play a huge role as well. I think that they have many different ways to attack us. I highly recommend, if you can, here in California we can, and I don't have a smart meter, but I would get that thing off as fast as you possibly can, if you can. And I think there's because smart meters have been starting fires forever. I mean, just ever since they've been put out, they've been starting fires. They have surges. They can turn off your. I used to, when I did have one for like a month before they took it off. They kept turning on my stereo kept turning on, just kept turning on, kept turning on. And then once it was, the smart meter was gone, the stereo never did that again. But they spy on you. They can turn on stuff. They can turn on sprinkler systems. They've destroyed people's businesses and homes that way. They can start fires. It's just, they're horrific and they're so unhealthy for you. So I think that we are being attacked through different means, and I think that they first start with arson, and then they can just kind of do whatever they need to do to follow up.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that these fires start simultaneously in different places, and that's actually like Quebec, right? Quebec in
Yes,
yeah,
I remember that. That was horrific.
yeah, same thing. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, we in BC, when we had this massive fire, was that last year when BC was on fire? Was that last year? Oh,
It was last year. Didn't you have
was
2 years in a row where you had really bad fires? It wasn't just 1 year, right? Wasn't it like a couple years of just like really bad fires?
we had a few. Well, actually, we always have fires. So BC is
Yes,
always on
yes.
fire every
Right.
year. But last year there was a massive fire in Kelowna. So Kelowna was really burning on the west side of town. So Kelowna is located right on the lake, on Okanagan Lake, and you have to cross the bridge in order to go south of to the south of BC, actually to the border, right? So this is where how Kelowna is located. So and the fires actually that massive fire was on the west side of Kelowna. And you could see it was really massive. It was so big, and the sky was dark gray. It was almost black. It was really, really massive fire. And then they said it jumped over the lake. I'm not sure if a fire really can jump over that kind of a lake. I'm not sure. I don't know. I can't answer that question, but then all of a sudden on the other side there was another fire. So it was very hot that year, but that kind of a fire, I don't think so. That was really interesting that this happened again in Kelowna. And by the way, 10 years, 20 years after that 2003 fire was a massive fire in Kelowna as well, on the south side of Kelowna. And it took down several hundred, 200, over 200 houses burned down. And so that was a massive fire.
We're definitely seeing here in the US, the 15-minute cities, the smart cities are burning. If I lived in a 15-minute city, you're on the list, I would be really worried. And LA was one, and Paradise was one, Lahaina was one, Santa Rosa was one. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And Oakland is, San Francisco is, that's not good. And I don't know if you have the same thing in Canada, but it's definitely happening here.
Yeah, definitely here too. And the
Edmonton,
worst one was
Vancouver.
actually a few years back when Lytton burned down. Lytton is a tiny community a little bit further north of Kelowna. And that is actually the town where our beautiful Dr. Hoff, right? Dr. Hoff was practicing there. And he was very outspoken when the COVID crap hit. Then he was one of the first ones that spoke up and exposed the COVID stuff as a lie and not a conspiracy theory, because that's us, right?
Did he get burned out? Did he get burned out?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So the whole town actually just burned down. Yeah. It
right.
was super hot that year. Yes. So we do have those fires here in BC for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Almost every year actually. Yeah, it's really, and several weeks ago, 2 months ago, something, we had one of our retired firefighters on our call. His name is Peter McIsaac. He's from Nova Scotia, and he was reporting on forest fires and how actually everything has changed over the last years, especially in firefighting. You know, the firefighters are not even experienced anymore. They're just put into these positions, into these jobs, and they have absolutely no education. They have no clue what they're doing. And we saw that not just in Nova Scotia with massive fires, but here in BC as well. 2 years ago, when we had this big fire in the Shuswap, where people, actually the locals, they do know how to deal with these fires. They know what is, you know, what needs to be done, and how they actually can contain these fires. But the firefighters and the RCMP, correct me if I'm wrong here, Nadia, and people from BC, they really stopped the people from coming in, from helping and supporting those people. You know, they had to find a way around it. They actually, they I don't know, they got a boat. They hired someone with a boat, and then they put the supplies and water and whatever food on these boats, and then they traveled all around and help those people just from somewhere, you know, just from a different direction, because they couldn't get in.
It's the exact same story here in the United States. Exact same thing with FEMA. And I did a Substack on this a year ago where I was saying, look, at when I went to Hurricane Katrina after it happened, I originally went there in 2005 because I thought climate change was real at the time, which I do not believe that whatsoever any longer. I went there to see what climate change and what these superstorms were going to be. And ultimately, what I found out was, and I went back twice. I went first time right after it happened. I went back on Christmas Day with my camera to record. And then I ended up doing a lot of animal rescue and so on. And so ultimately, I got story after story after story, just all these personal accounts of how people are going out there, you know, reconnecting their ham radio antennas, doing this, doing that. And here would come FEMA, here would come National Guard, and they'd literally destroy whatever it is people were putting back together. They were literally hindering these individuals from being able to help themselves. And I said, and it happened, it was so bad that there's a woman I met who was a oil baroness by the name of Martha Murphy. And being the oil baroness that she was, she actually brought in a huge tanker truck full of gasoline. And when that came in, so she can like do little 5-gallon rations to everybody so they can cut their way out of their, you know, roads and driveways and things. FEMA came along, put a gun to her head, accused her of being a looter. She said, I'm Martha Murphy. This is my oil tanker. And then National Guard came along, did the same thing. She's like a little 5'4", little petite, little Southern belle, right? Not a looter. And then this happened a couple times. And then a few days later, she brought in $100,000 worth of pharmaceuticals because people were dying. They didn't have their medication. And here came FEMA and National Guard again, did the same thing again, accused her of being a looter. Finally, she went to the sheriff and said, I want you to deputize me so I can be a deputized sheriff essentially, and I would override these assholes because they're preventing us from helping each other. And so, and I said, and this is when Lahaina had happened, and I said, look, they're going to do the same thing. This is what they do. They're corrupt. This is their job. And then when I went, also by the way, guys, when I went there the second time to Hurricane Katrina, I went into what's called Plaquemines Parish, which is where there was a FEMA guard. I had a FEMA badge from when I was staying at the camp a few months before. I was required to have one, so I just flashed it like I belonged there. And I got in this area that was off to the public, and we were there with huge aluminum foil tins and lasagna tins to put dog food in fresh water and stuff like that for animals that did survive. They said nothing survived, but there were animals that survived. And as we were going back there, then we figured out why it was blockaded and cut off from the public is because we saw the levee that had broken, and it hadn't broken. It had been blown up.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we saw that, we're like, oh, now we know what's going on. And so every one of these hurricanes, every one of these these you know, catastrophic fires, they start out with one thing like, oh, it's just natural or whatever they do, right? They set it off and then they come in there and they do the destruction and they use the catastrophe for the cover.
Mm-hmm.
And so I saw that. And so I was warning people with Lahaina. I'm like, look, FEMA is not your friend. They're going to come in there and they're going to, National Guard, you don't want them either. They're going to mess you up. And sure enough, next thing you know, Lahaina, same darn thing. Goods and supplies aren't getting to them. things they're trying to do put together are getting destroyed. We started seeing that as well in, of course, even Los Angeles. FEMA wasn't around. They're blocking off, people getting back and cleaning out their properties. And so now what has happened, whether you like Trump or not, he's going in there and he says, you know what? I think we're going to get rid of FEMA. They're just a bunch of corrupt idiots. They are hampering recovery. Look what happened with Hurricane Helene. I mean, these poor people are living in tents and it's freezing cold. And within days, he's got thousands of soldiers in there and they're getting taken care of within days. So his thing is we're going to get rid of FEMA, give so much money to each state, and the states can take care of their own natural disasters because they're going to be the most invested at all. So I think it's what we see with FEMA, with these agencies, and with us, like Cal Fire, and I'm sure with also Canada, is like with Cal Fire, fire prevention is not profitable. Fire suppression is. And they don't have incentives to prevent fires because that's not where the real money is. So they don't care about putting out the fires. And I've had too many tells, personal accounts of individuals I know who are actual firefighters, like when Paradise happened, it was a red flag warning that day. They were all on guard. They're all sitting there waiting for any kind of call. Paradise came in. It's explosive, and they're waiting. They're waiting. They're waiting for the call. They're hours away, right? So they're waiting for the call. The call never came in. They let the fire get massive. They let it explode, and they didn't have the firefighters come in.
Yeah.
And so this is a pattern, you guys, that we see every time. And we've got to call this out to our government, say, hey, look, we know what's going on. And you've got to stop making these, profit-driven agencies that are there to make money rather than to save our forests and to save our communities and our infrastructure and our lives. And it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem.
Yeah. Terry, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
I was I was just Reinette covered it. I was just going to emphasize that it seems like when I went to the West Kootenays, it seemed like so obvious to me that there's either smoke, fire, or floods all the time now in the last 5 years that have been quite uncontrollable throughout BC. When you look at firesmoke.ca, you'd look at the province and the whole thing looked like a big giant ball of flame. And so, like the smoke is also just as equally, if not, you can die from the smoke inhalation or whatever the toxins are coming out at you.
Well, I did another Substack too. We had here in called Moss Landing, which is by Monterey Bay, the Monterey Bay Aquarium, highly fragile ecosystem, and tons of legacy ranchers and organic farms. Like a ton. And they had this lithium factory blow up and just burn, 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 burn. And once again, the EPA, the CARB, they're not testing. They're not testing. They're not testing anything to see if the soil, the farms, the dairies are safe, any of that. And I tell people all the time, fire is used for war. It's a proxy, it's a tactic of war, poisoning our food. Thank goodness. Today, I don't know if you saw this, but the press secretary, Trump's press secretary, was talking today, and they were saying, and they're blaming Trump for the price of eggs in America. They've skyrocketed. And they're like, wait, this started a long time ago, A. B, you've been killing all the chickens. You're killing all the chickens. You're killing all the egg producers. And all of a sudden we don't have eggs and the prices have skyrocketed. And God bless this woman who's the press secretary. She just nailed them to a wall. And that was good. I'm like, thank you. I cannot believe that we continue to have a press and leaders and journalists and so on who ignore the obvious. It's like prices being driven up because you're destroying all of our food sources. You're destroying all of our networks. You're destroying everything, our cows, our dairy. Of course this is happening, and they never put two and two together. So I'm hoping that the truth telling that is going to be coming out of the White House, and again, they're also now at these press conferences, they're opening it up to bloggers and Substackers and independent journalists and citizen journalists. They're not letting major media in, they're just not. And so there's been a lot of truth telling, and I'm hoping that this catches fire, excuse the pun, with other nations who start calling out, like, don't start putting the blame on somebody else or saying this is why the price of eggs are going up when you guys are the ones killing all the chickens. And so I hope those lights keep shining and I hope it happens. I mean, the fact that Trump went to LA and actually was hinting to the fact that these weren't natural fires and a lot of odd things happened, I was like, thank you, you know. So this is good. It cracks it open. It's good. It's good.
But this
I've got
isn't anything new, though. They've done this in the 1800s where they burned cities down to the ground,
100%. It's old
right?
tactic.
Yeah, it's just all old, rinse and repeat. Even
Yeah.
COVID. I mean, COVID, they've done it 3 times already.
We had a Matt, actually a real popular Substack, Matt Rowski from Cultivate Elevate. A couple weeks ago, we did this on Tataria and the Great Reset and the Old World and all that and the great fires that we had, like Seattle and Boston and blah blah, all the in Europe. I mean, there's all these great fires of burning down all the cathedrals and museums and the books and the art and the history and the maps and we've always had these resets, and it's the same thing. They try to destroy as much as they can, and they start the whole new narrative. And it's, as you said, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. So I think the biggest difference in what we have going for ourselves here now, unlike any other time before, is quite frankly the internet. I mean, I can't believe they've kept the internet flowing and open as much as they have, to be quite, I really can't, because we are waking up and we're seeing the patterns. We're seeing the rinse and repeat. We're seeing how, oh, you've done this before. Oh, and there's just questions you can't answer under the current narrative. So I think they can't put this cat back in the bag, and they're trying hard, but I don't think they're going to be successful. And I think that the US election, though a lot of people are baffled, like, why would Americans ever vote Trump in? Well, they're voting Trump in to clean house and to monkey wrench the system. I mean, whether he's going to or not is, another debate, but that's what Americans want. They're like, we just, burn this house down, we're done. And I hope that other citizens are, going to do the same thing and say, you know what, we're done. We're done. We're going to do the rinse. We're going to do the rinsing now, and not repeat, over and over again. So it's really fascinating times we're in right now.
Well, from people
absolutely.
that I knew that were in the US Army, I would often ask them this question. When you go into your building, which president is on the wall right now?
Oh, interesting.
And it was never Biden.
Was it always Trump?
It was always Trump. And I said,
Yeah.
well, why is that? And they're like, we're not allowed to say. And I said, oh, so I can read between the lines. Trump is not out of presidency. He's still in presidency, even though they did a fake election through the corrupt government that's there.
Yeah,
They
I'm
would not give me an answer.
very familiar with that. And so I don't know if you guys know about this, but supposedly, I mean, I have no doubt that Trump did win the last election and it was completely rigged. And when I ran for governor here in California 2 years ago, it was also completely rigged. We knew what the numbers were. We knew what was going on. It was like, just like so wackadoodle that there was no way that Newsom got double the votes when he was so unpopular, compared to 4 years earlier. And we knew it was being rigged. So with Trump, I have no doubt that he won, and I think the story goes that they let Biden do what he needed to do to wake people up to, like, who is this guy? I mean, and it's true. At the end of his term, I had a few remaining Democrat friends saying, "Oh my God! I mean, like, who's running the show? I mean, he's checked out. Like, who is the president? Like, what's going on here? And so it was so disgusting, the DEI stuff and just all of the all the laundering of money, sending all the wars, Ukraine, Israel, all that, right? It's just been a bloody, bloody nightmare. And so supposedly they had to let this happen in order for Trump to then come back and then really do what he needs to do. And without question, I have to say, he's is and will be more successful than if he had been elected 4 years ago, because he has a lot more support. He has a massive he has a mandate. And it's up to us now to hold his feet to the fire in areas that he may kind of go sideways. But I've been told by a lot of people, and well, interesting enough, you guys, when Biden first got elected, I was watching the live stream of the White House, and I watched it every night for a month, and that place was dark. There was nobody in it.
Hmm.
And they actually have a fake White House. I think it's in Florida or Georgia. I can't remember which one it is.
Georgia.
Right, Georgia.
Mhm.
And also he always has like these weird sets that he's at. Like, I mean, Trump's back in the Oval Office. They're actually like in the Oval Office. They're actually back in the briefing, the press room again. I mean, they're actually there. They haven't been there for 4 years, and so it does make you kind of wonder what the heck is really going on. And um
Well,
yeah,
there was video surveillance of the White House right after Biden got in that came out on the dark web that showed kids
I saw that running out.
coming out
Yeah, I
through an
saw that.
escort. And it was like thousands of kids that were coming out
Yeah.
through those tunnels.
Yeah, and I've seen, unfortunately, on Telegram, I've seen some brutal photos. I mean, like really brutal photographs
Hmm.
of what's happened to these kids. And this isn't Photoshop. This isn't fake. It's like it's the ugliest of the ugly. It's like it's not even human. If you could see what these people have done to these children, and that's like, I say to people that that is the belly of the beast. That is what keeps us in this low, low vibration as a planet, is that this is happening and we are essentially a food for these things. And
Hmm.
and we're just kept in the dark so it could just continue. And I interviewed Kathy O'Brien, who's an MK Ultra survivor, very well known, written several books, and she's a very lovely, sweet, I mean, angelic Christian woman now. And the fact that she could go through what she went through. I mean, they sold off to the White House. I mean, it was disgusting, and her daughter as well. And so, she talks about how, this is something that's very, very real, and the MK Ultra brainwashing too, which half America is brainwashed. So it's hard to believe this kind of stuff happens, but she talks about it, and that this is how they blackmail and they control the whole entire government and everybody else and the media and the Hollywood. And I'm like, it's very, very true. And so, but you can't escape it.
Hmm.
And she, it's really fascinating too. Um, she escaped it, and this is really interesting because a few years ago here in the States, they got rid of cursive writing in the schools. No more cursive writing. And the reason she was able to escape it was her husband, who was part of helping people get out of brainwashing in the MK Ultra program. He rescued her, and they ultimately got married. Um, Anytime she'd have a flash of any kind of images or any memory, he's like, you got to write it down. You got to write it. She had to write it down. By writing it down, it released it. So it was really just writing. It was the power of writing it down and writing it down, and until there was just like nothing left to write. And so that's where we are. And I do know, and she said Trump was the only president ever to address human trafficking. And
Hmm.
he did do something about it then. And he's already, I think they've already rescued, I mean, how like 11,000 children already in a few days.
300,000.
Or there are
300,000.
300,000. No, actually, it was 85,000.
Yeah, it was 85,000 the last day, but it's in total 300,000 in 11 days.
They know where these kids are. They've known the whole entire time they've known. And my God, I mean, and Biden and I don't know, I've gone on the website where there's all the photographs from Hunter Biden's laptop, and it's really bad. I mean, it's bad for Biden, it's bad for Hunter, it's bad for all of them. And the average American hasn't seen that yet. It's so bad. So
Mhm.
Trump is going to blow that up. He is blowing it up.
Oh yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
know earlier you were talking about the pollution in the skies from the airplanes, and I don't know how where you are, but there's high-speed rails that are going through all the tunnels that they were taking out. That these trains are going like 4,000 miles per hour. They don't have any electricity because they're all done through magnets, and they're
Yep.
just shooting these trains from like
Yep.
LA to New York in like 15, 20 minutes. And they've been in circulation now for over 4 years that I'm aware of. Anyways, I think it's long before that.
I think it's long before that. There was a gentleman that was being interviewed, and he said, "Yeah, I worked at the Starbucks down below under LA,
Hmm.
where all the Hollywood stars they just drive underground and they pop up, and they don't have to deal with traffic and so on." And he would say, "Yeah, so and so movie star likes this kind of, fraccia pinot, blah blah blah," and he like tell them all whose drinks, but he's like, it's a whole underground world. I kid a lot, but I say, I kind of feel like we here on the surface of the planet are like from the Return of the Jedi, we're like the Ewok village, and there's all this highly sophisticated stuff going above and below us, and we're like, we have no idea what's really going on.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it feels like. And I have no doubt that there is an underground sophisticated, in fact, I can tell you something right now, tell you a story, law of geoengineering, but it's still, it's all connected. I have no doubt that we've got UFOs, ETs. I've been to a couple places, the SETI Ranch in the state of Washington, where you just use it's a highway of UFOs going in and out of Mount Hood. It's just we went there, friends, as a bucket list thing, a trip, and there's thousands of them. It's crazy. It's like it was insane. And then you put your military binoculars on, and there's even more. You're like, this is crazy. So I feel like that's kind of where we are. But I had a housemate here during COVID, former military Air Force flight surgeon, retired, and she said to me, yeah, the Pentagon, you got the Pentagon, and then you got 12 stories below that. And like at story number like 7 down under the ground, humans are allowed under from that point on. And I was like, what? You like, yeah, humans can't go belong that point. So what's going, so she talked about how, and I've had this confirmed actually, how like LAX and certain airports have what are called, what are they called? Jump seats, something like jump seats, where you go up into the towers, the higher towers, and that's actually like almost like a little mini space station, and you can jump. It's a portal essentially, go from different places to different places,
Hmm.
and absolutely fascinating hearing what she had to say. Oh,
Yeah.
and she was actually also overseeing 300,000 employees with NSA, and she was actually trying to also stop uh, the um, the child trafficking. She was actually working with Rosie O'Donnell, of all people, to put together a nonprofit to help rehouse these kids. And she was working on that, and they were going to do some story on her or something like that. And a Netflix documentary had been out about like these Navy SEALs that were going out there and rescuing children. And the documentary got into the hands ultimately, and I think it was like Netflix when it was actually still Netflix, like you had like a little disc, right? Not the one that's online. And the military, not the military, the mafia, the Mexican mafia got a hold of it, and they went into the US and they assassinated every single one of those Navy SEAL members, and they killed them. And so one day, this woman, the Air Force flight surgeon, who was my roomie, was in Santa Monica, and she got a knock on the door. And there's all these women standing in front of their door when she answered it. And like, hi, we're all, we were married to, these men, and we're here to warn you. We heard about what you're doing with Rosie O'Donnell and so on. And these are our husbands, and they're all hunted down and killed. And if you don't stop, they're going to do the same thing to you. So she had to stop what she was doing. It was so dangerous. But
Hmm.
she said she just saw busloads, busloads, and the military was engaged in it. And it was busloads of children just coming over, just free flow, just coming over.
Hmm.
And it was horrifying. She said it was horrifying.
Called quantum jumping is what it's called.
Quantum jump. That's right. That's very good. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So there's, I feel like, I mentioned sometimes in my Substack a guy named Cliff High. He does a lot of like, the linguistics analysis online, and total brainy man. And he talks about how all the stuff is coming to the surface, and all the technology is coming to the surface, and how there's gonna be massive changes and upheaval and so on. And I'm like, bring it on. But I think we're there. And I think the magnetic stuff too. I mean, we could be having magnetic trains and magnetic vehicles, and we don't need petroleum for our traveling purposes at all. And maybe that's what it comes down to. Maybe we stop flying, and we actually do magnetic trains instead. I mean, to
Yeah.
be honest, it'd be really good if we could take those underground magnetic trains and just, make them available to the public, to be honest. I mean, like,
Yeah, I've heard they're coming out by 2027.
that'd be
Like when
fantastic.
they'll be for the public. They are testing them now to see if they're good.
That makes me very happy, because that would take care of the air situation for sure. Possibly the shipping too, if they go that far. But there's no, I mean, we hear weird booms here. I get people talking about weird booms. They're hearing explosive booms, like what the hell's that? And there's no report. It's like sounds like it's underground. And I mean, I'm definitely hearing a lot of that and seeing a lot of that. What a time to be alive.
Yeah, I know. It is really exciting. And I mean, the other thing too is, I mean, I was dead set on buying a Tesla, just so everyone knows, up until 2021. And then I did a lot more research and realized how much radiation there is coming off those cars, how bad they are for the environment. And they have water-powered cars that will take any kind of water, salt or fresh water that you
Yeah.
put right into where your gas tank is, and it'll go like 2,000 miles before you have to put more water into it. And they keep killing all the prototypes as fast as Tesla's making them right now. They're killing them. And although Porsche has released a hydrogen-powered car, which they're converting and they're trying to make that go, which is mostly water in how they're changing the molecular structure. But still, you got to take out two tanks and you got to twist them in and you got to get them like propane tanks. But still not the best. But I mean, at least it's a step forward.
It's a step forward, and I think that people are going to be demanding that. In fact, I did a Substack on the batteries, burning batteries last week, just about how the Ford Pinto was deaths due to it spontaneously catching on fire, or if you hit the back end and just explode. And here we've got like nearly 90 deaths in with the Teslas alone. And that doesn't include, the burning lithium. I mean, it's just so bad. And just when you look at the child slavery and the mining and you disposing and the fires you can't put out. And I mean, like all LA, you think of all the lithium batteries that were burning in the LA fire. That was an extraordinarily toxic smoke. I mean, we're talking, think of the Teslas, think of all the e-tools, think of all of the solar panels, the Tesla batteries for the solar panels. I mean, it was people were bad off. I mean, it was not good. I mean, they're getting rashes, their eyes are swelling up, breaking out in boils. I mean, it was bad. It was really bad. That stuff needs to be taken off the market. Taken off the market, and no one's even mentioning it. Nobody even whispers the idea of recalling those cars or taking them off the market. It's not even whispered right now.
Mhm.
It's
Well, I
insane.
mean, the electric cars are, that industry is in huge trouble, and the car manufacturers know it, and all of them are walking it back to be 100% electric by 2027. I think they wanted
We're
to
doing
be.
100% gas powered.
They wanted to be 100% electric, and GM and Ford were the first ones to back out.
Yeah.
And now Audi, Volkswagen, Porsche, they're all backing out of that commitment, and they are going more hybrid, especially after Toyota president had an interview 2 years ago, I think it was now, and the interviewer said, "Why aren't you committing to going to 100% electric?" And he said, "Easily." He said 1990. And the interviewer's like, "Why? What is that? What do those numbers mean?" He says, "For every one electric vehicle that I produce, I can produce 9 hybrids using the same amount of minerals, or I can produce 90 gasoline cars. Why would I ever go electric?" And it doesn't change the environment at all.
No, it's worse.
Yes, it makes it worse.
It's worse.
But
It's a boondoggle. Yeah. I
yes.
just, an article came out today in Vox.com, and they're talking about, what's it called? Let's see if I can find it. I thought it was really interesting. It wasn't as in depth as I was hoping because there's some other really good stuff. I wish you would have shared the reporter, but let me see here. It was called RFK. It's about RFK and the whole MAHA things. Is RFK Jr. and the new far right environmentalists. And it's talking about how these far right people are becoming environmentalists. And it's actually kind of like more like the rancher, the farmer, they just naturally take care of the land anyway. That's just what they do. But we're just talking about how, yeah, I was very much involved in sustainability and building science and, really pushing, at the time CFLs and solar and all this stuff. And now I was involved in building science. And that's when I found out that because I was the head of the State Department that was training contractors how to use building science. And when I asked the gentleman who's in charge of it, kind of the grandfather of it, he was on the Energy Commission for California. I said, you talk about when you rip out all these old, single pane windows and the insulation, this and that, and then you put in double pane and this and that and more insulation, all this stuff. I said, you're saying, well, once you get all in there, you save all this energy. I said, but what's the cradle to grave calculation like? How much does it cost to rip all that stuff out and haul it to the waste, to the dump? And then how much does it cost to mine it all and to produce it and then transport it and package it and blah, blah, blah? Like, what's the cradle to grave calculation for all that? And he's like, oh, no, we don't have that. And I said, what do you mean you don't have that? And he's like, I said, well, then you might be doing more damage than good. And so
Exactly.
that's, of course, when I discovered that every single sustainable or renewable energy product out there does the same damn thing, including climate change. They take a little
Mhm.
tiny slice. They say, look at how great this is or how terrible this is. Here it is. This is what's how many cost savings. And they don't look at everything else. And it's just, it's horrific. I mean, it's criminal. It's actually criminal. It's criminal. Yeah. Doing a lot of damage. I mean, we're looking now at all the offshore windmills and they're shredding, the plastic is shredding off of it. And there's just plastic shreds of just awful. I mean, people, they're getting cut up on the beaches because there's so much plastic now from the
Mhm.
windmills. The blades are starting to fall apart and they just start to, it's just, yeah.
Well, I mean, all you have to do is just go with 0 point generators that are just done through magnets and copper, and you just
Yep.
spin it, and one
Yep.
unit can run 4 houses. Like, I mean, and it's smaller than an air conditioner that goes at the side of your house, and they just go forever. There's no wear and tear on it. There's no nothing.
I know. Well, this Cliff High talks about this, I think he says, it's going to be kind of like the steampunk era of the turn of the century where all these wild inventions come out, very decentralized, small mom and pop, households doing it. And I'm like, bring it on. Because that's what I want. I mean, like we have PG&E here, Pacific Gas and Electric, which was signed into existence about 4 blocks from me here in the 1800s because we're a gold mining area. And that's where they started. And they're like a terrorist organization these days. I mean, they've killed tens of, they've killed dozens, hundreds of people. They've killed hundreds of people and
Mhm.
destroyed thousands of homes and communities and they laugh at us, they mock us, and they hate me, by the way, and I don't like them. We know each other. And um they're diabolical. They're a terrorist organization. And I'm like, just make them go away, decentralize all of it, decentralize everything, your food network, your energy, all of it. And
Mhm.
even water, go for primary water and get off that big government, excuse my French, tit, where you depend upon that as well as big corporations that are literally killing us.
Yep.
So, and I there is this mass awakening happening. And so when it comes to back to geoengineering, when we were talking about like, how do we get control of the skies and the shipping, um, we can go out there and force the fossil fuel industry to refine their jet fuel even more. But again, it's already nano. Like I asked this really brilliant guy, I said, do we have the capacity? Do we have the ability to actually clean out even more of the nanoparticulate matter? And he goes, well, like how nano do you want to get is what he said. Like, nano is nano and it just gets more, it gets smaller and smaller. It's like, so how much are you talking about? I mean, like at what end, what point do you stop? I'm like, that's a really good point. So I feel
Well, I
like in
mean, there is
order
an option. Instead of using jet fuel, you can use element 115, which is what
element,
yeah, what UFOs use, which is heavy water, and it makes the crafts anti-gravity, which allows them to flow easier, but they're refusing to do it, and they can manufacture it. Like they don't
well,
even.
see, that to me is what I was kind of getting to is like, it's refining the fuel is ultimately not going to be the answer, right? It's got to be something like that that's just radically different, or
Well,
something.
and that's why I think you're seeing this stuff with Boeing right now. So I actually think that there's a movement in place to take the planes out of the sky so the public view them as dangerous. And so I purposely think that Boeing and other manufacturers are purposely building crappy planes, and they're having all these whistleblowers come forward to allow it to happen, to allow the magnetic
The public.
trains to take off. Yes.
Well, I love flying. No, I used to love flying. I don't like it so much anymore. The fun's been taken out of it, but I love trains. I love trains. Traveling by train is actually my favorite. I've traveled around the world a lot on trains. That would be the best. I mean, that really truly would be the most ideal. And
And the safest. And the safest.
much, much, much safer. Much,
Hmm.
much, much safer. And I would love for our skies to get back. I want our skies back. I mean, it's, like many places, there's sometimes weeks where we do not see the sun.
Hmm.
And whether you see the chemtrails or not, you're still getting sprayed no matter what. But when it's those hazy days, it does a real psychological number on people. I mean, it's really very, very depressing. It's like, mental warfare, psychological warfare. I'm excited by what you have to say, and I think that I think we're on the brink of that. And I'm and again, we are definitely, and Bettina probably can speak this too. there's been an exponential curve of awareness going on the last few years. People are like looking up unlike ever before. And now with all the fires, all that stuff going on with the dews, right? You know, the UFOs, the drones. Now, all of a sudden, one day, people are like looking at it, like, hey, what's going on up there? All of a sudden, they start looking up for the first time, like, wow, you just figured out there's a sky up there, and so people are all of a sudden paying attention, and just a flight radar. I see people all the time grabbing images from flight radar. Do you see this? Do you see that? Where they didn't even know what flight radar was before, and so it's really it's COVID has unleashed citizen journalists and investigators and researchers and people who are just questioning the narrative unlike ever before. And I did a talk about a year ago. A guy named Sasha Stone was here visiting, did a big show with people, big, group. And I was one of the speakers, and mine was called Thank You COVID, because like, thank you for all these unintended consequences. I mean, you brought us together. We're researchers. We're tougher than ever. We're network. We've started, private membership associations. We started homeschooling. We started growing our own food. We know how to do public records requests. We know how to run for political positions. This is what COVID unleashed. And people now too are actually finally starting looking up, going like, what the heck happened to my son? And I think that it's exciting,
It is exciting, but it also, still have a lot of work to do to
Oh,
teach
yes.
people what geoengineering means, what it is. And so most people really do only refer to what's going on in the skies, right? There is so much more to geoengineering. I just recently presented to a group. I was really kind of excited that the turnout was pretty good. I didn't expect that at all. It was a completely spontaneous presentation. They caught me off guard, and they said, well, why don't you just put on a presentation? And I'm like, well, I certainly I can, because I have it. It's ready. And they did not. When you stop talking about this here, the lines in the sky, and you all of a sudden you touch ship tracks, then you go into cloud seeding, and then you go into any other form and type of geoengineering, then people were like, what?
Yes.
I had no idea that this is going on, and this is also geoengineering, right?
That's right.
Yeah, there's
Well, I
lots.
have to say that's actually important, because we talk to people a lot, like Jim hits upon this, Jim Lee, about the language you use, the terminology you use, and you have to be really like cognizant of like who it is you're speaking with.
Yeah.
And you got to kind of come in sideways. And what we have discovered is that if you talk about the clandestine programs out there where they're trying to depopulate and blah, 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 and my God, they're spraying us, people, they just close down, they're done, they don't hear you, and they glaze over. But when you say, hey, I want to show you these rainwater samples that we got back. Look at all this aluminum, strontium, barium, cobalt, blah, blah, blah. This is in our backyard, Mr. County Supervisor, Mr. City Council Member. And this is in our water, our food. It's in our, our organs. It's in our brain. And they're like, wait, what? And then you go, oh, by the way, when you broach it about the commercial aircraft, the commercial airlines, and it's the shipping, the cargo ships, because again, and that's why I think Jim Lee is also talking to us about our lawsuit, couching it around pollutants and not getting into the geoengineering fight. Because then you've got this whole other fight, like, is it real? Is it not? Are you conspiracy theory? Aren't you? Where these are pollutants, and and they're like, oh wow. And once you open their eyes up to that, then they're willing to expand later on and go down that road. Whereas if you go into the clandestine, secretive, DARPA, whatever programs, you lose people instantaneously. So I agree with you. And I mean, I've done a lot of talks, interviews, and people have, as you just said, Bettina, people have no idea. They have no idea what the commercial industry is doing or what the shipping is doing. They have no idea. And I give really huge credence to Jim Lee for educating me on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you're totally right. The terminology is very, very important. And this is how we have to teach, and what we have to teach people, to use the right terms, because everybody is talking chemtrails. And then when I came out and I said, I do not use the word chemtrail whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's a contrail.
Right.
And so, and everybody was like, no, 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 it's not a contrail, it's not a contrail, it's a chemtrail. And I said, okay, let me explain to you why a contrail is a chemtrail and a chemtrail is a contrail. So when you start explaining that to them, and you have to slowly get to the point, right? So you have to really build that up so that people then finally get where you are coming from and why you are not using chemtrail, and especially not when you talk to officials, right? Here
Right.
in Canada, to MPs and MLAs and city council, these guys, when you talk to them and you start with chemtrail, just you can just walk out the door, because they will not listen to you.
No, they literally shut down and glaze over. And when you talk about what we just mentioned, like air traffic and shipping, their mouths drop. They
Yeah,
hear that. They're like, "What?" I'm like,
yeah,
"Yeah, it's 39 million flights a year, 15 million barrels." They're like, 15 million barrels of jet fuel are being. I'm like, every day, and I'm like, sadly, whether you see those streaks in the sky or not, you're still getting sprayed. It's
yes,
not, maybe mentally, emotionally, it's better for you because you can still see the sun, but it doesn't matter. You're still getting sprayed, which is not good news. And they're like, "What?" And I'm like, exactly. And the closer you
yeah,
are to a metropolitan area, the more you're getting sprayed. So that has, I mean, I've never had a conversation or an interview with anybody where I brought that up and they closed down from that. I've
yeah,
never had them close down from that,
yes,
which
yeah,
tells you a lot.
yeah, 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 exactly. It's really important to speak their language,
Yeah.
right?
Tim talks about that. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
He's like, he talks to scientists differently than he does public officials, than he does to the average citizen, to whatever. He has certain terminology, and yeah, which is
Yeah,
smart.
exactly. Yeah, and build it up and explain it, especially when you talk, for example, about radius on data. When do you actually do see a trail,
Yeah.
right? When you see a trail. And I built this up too, and I said, no, well, it does not necessarily mean, as when we do not see a trail, that it's not happening. It is still happening, because the overhead aviation is still
The
there.
atmosphere is not, it's just not conducive to seeing it. But we have on our saveourskies.org, on the landing page, you scroll down and there is a what's it called? The Save Our Skies, I think it's Save Our Skies powered toolkit or something like that. And it's about 70 some PowerPoints, is a slide deck. And it goes into all that, it goes into the terminology, it goes into the history of geoengineering, starting with cloud seeding 150 years ago. It goes into all that, and then it goes into the jets and how much is flying and the nanoparticulate matter. And yes, there are these clandestine programs, and these are the bad guys like Bill Gates and David Keith and so on. But you've got basically, you kind of get into the stuff that people can actually hear you, and it also talks about the proper terminology and what you say or don't say. And then it gets into actually what to do about it. Like, here's how you collect your rainwater. This is who you send it to. These are the heavy metals you actually, test for, and this is how you get involved. And so we have this as a toolkit, this PowerPoint for people to really just become really familiar with, so that when they go out there and they're talking about this, they actually can talk like an expert, and they
Yeah.
use the right terminology, and they come into it sideways, as we're saying, talking about commercial flights, talking about shipping, and that gets people realizing, oh wait, and the thing is this, is that when it comes to legislation and or it comes to the lawsuits, we're looking like the broad, umbrella, right? That's kind of like a catch-all, so it catches everything. And so that's where we have to frame it just right, and make sure that whether it's a clandestine program or it's commercial aircraft, that it's got to stop.
Correct. I agree with you. Yeah, wow, what a talk. Well,
We've covered a lot of ground, to say the least.
we did actually. Yes, absolutely. Is there anybody that has a question? I know that Troy always has questions. So come on, go right ahead, Troy. I'm calling on you.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, don't be shy. Exactly.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, yeah. Yeah, you're right. A lot of ground was covered tonight. I'm in Nova Scotia, and yeah, we had fires, was it last year or the year before, caused by climate change, but ironically lit by people. And yeah, my buddy Peter McIsaac, he was on a call here, I think it was last month, and for 20 years he worked in the prevention of forest fires. He worked for the government, and it was systematically throughout the years. Funding was cut, just like in California, and
Yep.
yeah, it was systematically done. One of the neighborhoods that burnt down, there was only one way into the neighborhood, and so people ended up. There was a big bottleneck. All these people trying to evacuate because they built this neighborhood with one road in,
Oh,
and then all these roads in there, and so it just makes no sense. And a couple of years ago, we had a big hurricane come through here and level half the province, and those trees are still laying down here. And so I've been attending these in my community. The municipality has been putting on these climate change meetings. It's put on by the climate change committee, and I was on the climate change committee until they kicked me off. And I was on there trying to steer them a little bit. I wasn't being as much of a tinfoil hatter as you guys are tonight. But I'm just bugging you. I'm on the same page with you. But I was trying to just kind of steer them and try to get them to look up a little bit and stuff like that. But I end up getting kicked off the committee, and so now they're regretting kicking me off because I'm attending all these meetings and I'm speaking out at them, and I'm not trying to. I'm not like, they've worked really hard on their presentation, and it's some older gentlemen and stuff, and I understand, like, they're scared, and they've been listening to the news too much, and so they're really afraid of climate change, and so their main things are the potential for forest fires with all these trees that have been knocked down by the hurricane, which are still laid down, and so they're really worried about forest fires, and they're worried about climate change, and the sea level rising is one of the other things that they're really worried about. And so they're talking about the sea level is going to rise by I think they said 30 inches by 2100, and so they just have. I asked them a question at the last meeting. I said, "Where are you getting all this information?" And they're getting their information from the UN, and so they're Googling stuff and taking stuff off the internet from the UN. The sea levels are going to rise to this level, and I just try to I'm trying to put things in perspective for them, and their idea is to replace the whole fleet of the municipal vehicles with electric vehicles. And here in Nova Scotia, we get our power. 60% of our power comes from coal power plant. And so I put it to, I said the same thing at 3 different meetings and different crowds at different meetings. And I can see the faces of people at these meetings, and they're like, they didn't really think about it. All they think about is, they're thinking, oh, electric vehicles, great, let's save the environment. And I say to them, I say, you're swapping one fossil fuel for another, right? You're plugging your electric vehicle into a system that's 60% coal. So I said, what logic is it to replace one fossil fuel with another? And so finally, at the 4th meeting that I brought this up, they did a little bit of research, and they're trying to change their tune a little bit to, how about hybrid vehicles? Are hybrid vehicles any better? And so they're asking me if I'd be all right with hybrid vehicles, but not sure. Like, anything would be, I suppose, better than a gas or a diesel vehicle, right? As far as spewing out pollutants. But I really think there are better alternatives, like hydrogen vehicles or water powered vehicles, and it drives me crazy that we've got these blinders on, like electric vehicles has to be electric vehicle, and nobody's thinking of any other alternatives. And another thing that we're doing here is wind power. Like, that's their whole alternative for coal. Let's get rid of the coal power plants, and we'll put up windmills. And so to put up these windmills, they're cutting down all these trees, putting cement, and then putting up these windmills they got a 20-year life expectancy to them. It drives me crazy. And so I go to these meetings, and I just try to put things into perspective and try to wake up the other people in the room a little bit to try to realize that this is just, it's nonsense to think that everything here in Canada is based on carbon. We pay a carbon tax. They put up this carbon tax every year, every 6 months. It seems like we're paying more carbon tax, and that's supposed to clean the air.
Right.
But nobody wants to seem to do any testing of water. I brought up water testing. I brought up air testing, and nobody really seems to want to do that. Right? That's just all about carbon.
Well, you know, I challenge people too, and I say to them, and across the board, I just say, look at, and this includes petroleum too. Give me the cradle to grave calculations. And generally they don't even exist, which right there should be your first red flag. But give me the cradle to grave calculation of the electric vehicle, of windmills, of solar, of all of it, right? Just give me the cradle to grave calculation, including the human rights violations, the slavery, the aftermarket, right? Where does it go, get thrown away? Does it seep into groundwater? Like, I mean, okay, guys, challenge them. Like, okay, you want this? Great. You've got to produce the cradle to grave calculations. And if you can't, you cannot tell me that it's better for the environment than what we currently have. So there's that. The other thing is too, is when I hear about these sea rises, you know, with Plymouth Rock, where the Mayflower landed, that water is still lapping at the shore, at the bottom of the Plymouth Rock. It hasn't gone up 1 inch. And if you notice, like the Pelosi's and the Obamas and the Chuck Schumers and all of them, they all have these beautiful palatial mansions on the coastlines. And I can tell you right now that no insurance company, nobody, no bank would ever allow them to do that if climate change and sea rises were real. They wouldn't allow them to build there. And these actuaries, they're the real deal. They don't mess around. So if it was really an issue, if sea rise was an issue, I can tell you right now, you'd never see one home ever again built on any shoreline whatsoever ever again. And the reason why they continue to be built is because there's absolutely no sea rise going on. Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
If you talk to an oil CEO, and which I have, they'll tell you, I'll say, are you not worried about these electric cars? And they're like, no, this is the best case scenario. To produce an electric car, it costs 7 times more in fossil fuels than it does to produce a gas-powered car.
Yeah.
They're like, this is great. We do the same work and we're getting paid 7 times more than we ever did before.
Right. That's insane, but it's true. That's exactly it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
And, and I've come a long way with oil, but, I got into environmentalism through what was peak oil, what's called peak oil. And I thought it was a real thing. And I thought that oil was finite, and it is very dirty. There's lots of bad things about it. But, I come to find out that like water, like primary water, the planet produces water like it produces oil, and like our bodies produce blood. And now that I know that, and you talk to anybody in the oil world, they'll tell you, you go out there and you empty out an oil reserve, and next thing you know, a few years later, it's full again. So we have an abundance of that. But again, we don't want to be burning it all left and right too, because all the reasons it's not great, all the particulate matter and so on, and the plastics and things like that. But my point is that we're not short on oil. But I want us to move away from using oil as for our transportation needs, especially.
Oh, definitely. There's got to be a better solution. Like after 100, 120, 140 years of burning oil, like we have to come up with a better solution, right? The technology that we have, but it seems like I don't know. Whenever I talk about the planes and I talk about the contrails and the pollution, like it's exhaust, like it's pollution that you see up in the sky, and it's clouding the sky. And Jim Lee has all taught us that there's something called contrail induced clouds, right? And so they're covering our sky, and when they cover the sky, they're blocking out the sun, they're cooling the planet. And so, but when I talk about that, and Bettina has witnessed it, I end up getting attacked and say that I'm trying to say that we should get rid of all planes, and I'm just playing into their agenda that we shouldn't be flying anywhere and we should own nothing and be happy, right? And That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that after all these years, there has to be a better solution. And how come I'm being penalized for driving my gas powered car to the store with carbon tax and being ridiculed for not driving an electric vehicle when all these politicians are flying out to Davos to scold me for driving my car, right? So
right, yeah, it's pretty bad.
and so
John,
I don't know if in the States, if you have carbon credits down there, like you have here, we have um, a big business can pollute and then they can buy carbon credits from companies that are set to sell these carbon credits. And so then they don't have to.
yeah. It's a shell game.
Yeah.
No, Canada's, you guys are much further ahead on the carbon credits than we are. There are things you can sign like a PG&E, you can sign, little carbon credits, this and that, blah, blah, blah. Or I want to use just alternative energy only. You can do stuff like that. But no, Canada, you guys have been way out ahead of us. California is not too far behind, but the states itself, no, Canada, you guys are getting tax heavy. You guys are way ahead of us. And I have to tell you right now, Trump just killed all that. Trump just killed all that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
He killed all the smart devices. He's like, even like you can have your choice in light bulbs now. I'm like, these LEDs are brutal. They're forcing us to buy LEDs only. He's like, we're done with this climate change nonsense. We're done with DEI nonsense. We're not doing the smart city. We're not doing any of that. He didn't say smart cities, but so that's huge. And getting us out of the WHO and the Paris Accord and all that. And and again, like FEMA, I mean, I'm like, thank you. I mean, he's really, God darn it, he's doing a number. So yeah, we're better off right now than Canada for sure, which is shocking to me because when Trump was first elected, I have to say my partner and I were thinking about moving up to Canada. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad I didn't. I mean the irony, the irony, yeah.
No, and I think well, the media and the politicians here are freaking out because of Trump talking about 25% tariffs, right? But
Yeah.
I think that I've been trying to put a positive spin on it. Like here in Nova Scotia used to have the biggest merchant navy in the world at one point, like back in the late 1800s, right? And there's a museum right down the road and it shows all the stuff that we used to produce here in Nova Scotia. We made cars here, we made TVs, we made stereos, we made computers. We made it all here in Nova Scotia. And I think that Trump talking about putting tariffs on stuff should be a wake up call to us that we should become more self sufficient and like we can be our own nation and we can produce our own stuff. And I've been doing it for the last since COVID. Like since COVID, we totally changed the way that we live and I've been homeschooling my daughter since COVID and I grow my own food now. And last year we grew our own chickens and I hunt and so I consider myself probably about 80% self-sufficient now. And when people complain to me about the price at the grocery store, a lot of times I don't even realize what they're talking about because I haven't been to the grocery store in months, right? So I don't know. I think it's time that we start taking care of ourselves and
well, that's dependent on the centralized system and the global system. And Trump's actually, he is deglobalizing us. And people have asked too, like, what do we do about the shipping? Okay, so maybe we fly less or you clean the fuel more, the jet fuel, but what about the shipping? I'm like, well, to be honest, and I said this months ago before Trump was elected, one of the best things we can do is bring industries and manufacturing back to America. So you don't ship your raw goods over there, then ship the cheap Chinese goods over, back to the US. I said, they don't have environmental regulations and we're still on the same planet. So sooner or later, you're going to be drinking that water or that rainwater or breathing that dirty air. So you're better to bring it back home where you have some environmental regulations. And you're just not so dependent upon that shipping itself, which is a big problem. So he's, and I agree. I mean, the backbone of America was the working class and it's gone. It's eviscerated and we need to bring that back. And so he's hell-bent on that. And I'm really happy to see that because we just, people are barely getting by, I mean, they're barely getting by. And he's also talking about getting rid of the income tax. And just doing tariffs only, which like we used to do 100 and some years ago, was tariffs only. And it's when the country was the wealthiest. We enjoyed the most personal wealth ever was when we had tariffs. And I'm like, that's a great idea. I mean, oh my Lord, the taxation that we go through is unbelievable.
Well, the personal income tax is actually illegal
Well, I
for,
know,
yeah.
I've never paid income tax. I don't pay income tax. You know why? Because I never sign my name on the dotted line and say I volunteer this. And I tell people that I was campaigning as governor saying, I don't pay income tax. Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, you're volunteering for it, folks. I'm sorry, but it's the biggest duping you've ever known. Once you sign your name though, man, they got you.
They
And
got you.
it's so, Trump's onto that. And I think that the more money we can put back into our pockets and build those local economies. And I say, people, you've got to reverse engineer your way out of this centralized system because it's trying to imprison you. It's trying to poison you, kill you, depopulate you. And like, the less dependent upon you are on it, the more likely you're going to live and be just fine and have a long life and not be completely broke. So.
Well, and the 25% tariffs too were contingent on how much steps the Canadian government was willing to take against the drug trade, the fentanyl
Yeah.
and the heroin coming into the country through the CIA and through the RCMP. And if
Adam,
anyone
Adam, we
knows
can't do
anything about
anything.
northern BC on how that works and their drug lines that they run directly into the United States, like I mean, people don't realize like how corrupt they actually are.
Oh,
And everyone loves the RCMP and they're like, once you dig into it just a little bit, I mean, it is all there, all the
they're all
evidence is there.
corrupt. They've all gone to the wayside. They're all corrupt. They're all done.
RCMP really corrupt mounted police.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But we can't do anything about drugs coming and going right now because we're too busy trying to find a new leader here. So our government's not even working.
Do you guys have a fentanyl problem in Canada?
Oh,
Oh my
massive.
God, yeah.
It is massive.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
I know a lot of, we've lost a lot. I mean, I have people I know who, a lot of people have died. It's so
Oh,
bad.
yeah.
In the prime of their life. Yeah,
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
is massive.
where I think a lot of it's coming from China.
it is.
Yeah.
It is 100%. Yes, it is. And they run it through. Yeah. Mexico and Canada. Yeah. It's the opium trade. I mean, we did with opium. I mean, that's what the Brits did. And they're just getting back. They're just getting back. It's another form of warfare. It's just like using fire as war. They're using the drugs and killing people. Same thing with COVID, right? The shot. Same darn thing. It's fifth generation warfare, though opium and that's not fifth generation warfare, but the bioweapons are, but it's really sad. It's been
Well,
brutal.
it'd be interesting to see if Canada actually officially publicly joins United States Corporation, because technically and legally they are always been the
No,
51st
out of
state.
BC. I know, it's crazy.
Out of well, they're located in
Delaware.
Manhattan, and they still use the postmaster in Philadelphia for shipping and commerce, which is the main way to identify a country. And they've used that since the 1700s. It's never changed.
That's insane. That's
Yeah.
insane.
So it'll be interesting to see if it's 51 stars or 61 stars that join the United States.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of people concerned about that. Because the Club of Rome thing, where they want to break us into certain sections, that's Canada, Greenland, US.
Yeah, 9 sections.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that'd
9
be
different
like
sections through North
the
Yeah.
America.
country of North America, including Greenland.
Yeah. So,
So that's all part of the one world government plan, right?
Yeah.
So
those sections, yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I think that well, Canada can barely even stay together as a country in itself, right? Like Quebec's always threatening to leave, and Alberta's threatening to leave, and so who knows what's going to happen, but I know that this spring I'm going to be putting seeds in the ground in my gardens, and I'm going to be growing my own food, and what Trump does or what our next prime minister does really isn't going to affect me that much. And sure, the price of gas pisses me off when the gas price goes up, but it's not really relevant to me in the whole grand scheme of things. I'm still going to be teaching my daughter about different plants that are going to heal her. And one thing that might help Reinette with her cough, if she has a diffuser, put some frankincense in that diffuser, and it really.
Let me go get a lozenge real fast. Wait 1 second, guys. Sorry, I did good till now.
You did. I really think that we have to we have to start taking care of ourselves. And I learned that after 2020. I haven't been to the doctor since 2018, and I've got no intention of going to the doctor and getting any prescriptions. And so
Oh, no.
really been healing myself. My wife broke her, fractured her foot 2 months ago, and she went to the doctor, and they gave her an air cast to put on it, and they x-rayed it, and they did a bone scan, and they told her that she'd be in pain for the next year, and that she because of the way that it was a crushing fracture on her fifth metatarsal, and so they said the way that it was fractured, that she'd be in pain, and she would be limping around for the next 4 months, and for the next year she'd be having to wear some sort of a brace on her foot. And so I made her a salve out of comfrey and castor oil.
Yep.
And within a month, she stopped wearing that air cast, and so she still has a little bit of pain, but she's not.
I'm telling you, that's what COVID did for us. They've learned how to take care of themselves. I mean, I don't even vitamins, prescriptions, meds, no. Doctor visits, no. I mean, there's tons of people. We have our own apothecaries. We are always sharing with each other. And again, my partner has not had a cold in 9 years. I have not had a cold in 5. And again, we do feel like this is a bioweapon. Everyone I know who has this, none of us feel like this is a normal cold. It's just not. They run the course and they're gone. And this is just, it goes around and around and around. It just, your body can't expel it. But I have to say, we have an 80-20 rule. We eat really healthy, organic, and then, we have a little bit of a social life. So we'll go out and see friends, and sometimes you have to kind of go to different restaurants that are 100% organic, but we're healthy. We make sure we're very healthy, and we get good sunlight. I love to listen to Dr. Jack Cruz. So I do the red light therapy too, and I make sure I get my morning sun and do my affirmations and my prayers and my thank yous, and my appreciations, and it all helps. It all helps.
For sure.
Yeah.
Also, speaking the word stop contrails, it goes a long way the more that you say it. And if we're all doing it, we're all connected, we're all one, we know this.
Yep.
It starts to go, and if it catches on, enough people see it and say, stop the contrails, it will eventually stop because they don't have our energy to feed it anymore.
Yep.
Good
Yep.
point.
Yeah.
Well, on that positive note, is there anything else that we should cover? We covered a lot tonight. Wow.
Covered a lot. We got onto some different topics, but they're all fascinating.
They all are. And you know what? It's all geoengineering no matter what. Because
Yep.
geo implies Earth, right?
That's right.
That's right. Well, then if there is anything else, is there anything else? Then what
No, I
about
just want to say thank you, you guys. It's so nice to talk to folks up north of me in Canada. I really love getting connected with you guys, and I'm just so glad to be connected always with like-minded people. I really thoroughly enjoy it, and it just lets me know that, nope, we're not alone whatsoever. And hey there. And that we found each other. COVID again has allowed us to find each other, and we're very networked and we're very powerful, and we're not going away anytime soon. So yeah.
No, we're not. And we keep doing what we're doing because we know it's right.
Oh yes, and we shall prevail for sure.
Yeah. Okay, if there is nothing else, then I would like to wrap it up and say thank you. Thank you, Reinette. Thank you for coming on tonight. It was very, very interesting. Like I say, we did cover a lot. It was beautiful. And again, it's all geo.
Right.
And, big time. And we keep in touch for sure. And Reinette, you know where to find me.
I do. Thank you, everybody. Love to do this again. Thank you so very much. And 2025, it's going to be an exciting year, to say the least. So good luck with everything that you guys are doing as well.
You too. Thank you so much. Thanks again.
Thank
Bye,
Okay.
everyone.
Good night. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.